First time I saw a coral reef, I was 6 years old. I was on the island of Hawaii, the Big Island, and on a family trip, the hotel we were staying at had this incredible lagoon that just gave me this amazing look into this almost alien world that's offshore. It feels like visiting an extraterrestrial planet, but it's right here. In some cases, just feet from where many people live. And that stayed with me my whole life. The colors, the shapes, the creatures, and did not put me on a path initially to become a coral farmer, but played a huge role in my love for the ocean, for reefs, and eventually, as soon as I was old enough, my parents got my brother and I both scuba certifications, so a connection to coral reefs really extends all the way back to childhood. Coral reefs have changed a lot since I was a kid, and even more so from before I was born. We've lost half the world's reefs since the 1970s. Right now we're on track to lose over 90% by 2050. And a lot of the coral reefs that I got to experience, even at that point, were already on the decline, and some of them are unrecognizable now. From the Caribbean to the Red Sea to the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, reefs are suffering all around the world. And I feel very lucky in many ways that I still got to see reefs as good as they were when I did, because this concept of shifting baselines plays such a role in how we understand and appreciate nature. I remember there's a dive I went on in the Florida Keys where 95% of the reefs are dead, and went with a guy who had been diving there back in the 70s. He pretty much came up from the dive weeping in his mask. I was blown away by how bad things looked, and this couple, no fault of their own, first time ever diving, did you see that grouper? And for them, seeing that one fish was incredible. And that's so great to know how they were still able to form that connection with the ocean, but them not knowing that there should have been 100 of those groupers. And instead of a rubble field of white and gray coral skeletons, there should have been this underwater wonderland is a huge challenge and is heartbreaking to see. Yeah, there's a lot of things I could be working on. I don't think it naturally was always going to be coral reefs. I grew up in Washington, D.C. The Potomac River is not a hotbed of reef magic, but I always was drawn towards fixing problems. I went to D.C. public schools. I was interested in education reform. My dad worked as a diplomat and in international security. I was interested in peacemaking. Ultimately, I studied climate change in college and then in grad school, in many ways because I saw it as a means to deal with a really serious challenge, but also one that impacts so many things that I care about. It impacts how society lives, it impacts nature, it impacts equity and education and even conflict. That still also wasn't a clear path to corals. While I was in grad school, I was studying things more and working in the policy space and NGOs. I had an opportunity on a gap year living in Mauritius in the Indian Ocean to do coral restoration for my friend's organization, Eli Africa, and saw how reefs can be brought back to life. So instead of planting trees for reforestation, planting corals for reef restoration. It's this amazing field that's existed for decades, incredible practitioners who've been pioneering this work. But I also saw that the existing model for coral restoration, relying on a grant from the United Nations or a fundraising gala, low-tech, small-scale, underwater nursery-based projects, doesn't cut it for how big this problem is. And fast forward back to grad school, where I met my friend and classmate Gator, which is really his name. He's also formerly a Summit Fellow as well. Gator and I were thinking about big environmental issues that matter and that matter to us. He grew up in the waves of the Pacific. I have this lifelong connection to coral reefs. Thinking about what if a business solution could solve for these pressing environmental challenges in ways that policymakers, NGOs, and researchers, hard as they're trying and as good of work they're doing, aren't able to solve effectively enough. And we were putting back a few drinks, thought about this idea around how valuable coral reefs are, and as they die, that economic value is threatened. What if we develop a business to work on coral restoration? And got a $1,000 grant from Yale, and 10 years later, I'm sitting here talking to you. A lot has happened over the past 10 years since Gator and I first came up with the idea for Coral Vita. So starting off with that $1,000 grant, it gave us enough money at the time to fly down to Florida, meet with state and federal regulators, legends in the coral restoration space who had pioneered these methods to accelerate coral growth rates, in some cases 50 times faster, months and years instead of decades and centuries. Had enough money to fly down here, rent a car, and not for hotels, so we slept in the car as we worked our way down from Miami through the Florida Keys. Took a couple years working part-time job in green roofing and all sorts of, odds and ends till we raised our first pre-seed round. We're figuring out where we're going to build farm number one. Was looking at the British Virgin Islands, Dominican Republic, ultimately settled on Grand Bahama, where we partnered with the Grand Bahama Port Authority and the Blue Action Lab, set up farm number one, had an amazing first few months of operations, integrating in the local community, using the farm as an education center for students, for fishers, and as a tourism attraction, starting to negotiate our first restoration as a service contract, actually getting ways for people to pay to restore reefs. And then 3 months after opening, the largest storm in recorded history to hit the Bahamas came through. Hurricane Dorian crushed Abaco and Grand Bahama, the island we set up shop on. Utter devastation, so many people's lives impacted, a lot of lives lost, billions of dollars in damages. And at our farm, we had a 17-foot storm surge. So literally saw our coral tanks wash 30, 35 miles away. We just did rescue, relief, rebuilding efforts for the next few months. Eventually got back on our feet, went out and raised a new investment round because we had actually accomplished a lot. We were growing 24 species of native corals compared to the 2 or 3 you normally grow in countries like the Bahamas. Success, as I said, on the business front, but also with coral baby making, which is a whole thing we can talk about later. And so we were actually able to raise a seed round and then not only rebuild, but upgraded our farm and reopened in March 2020, just in time for COVID. And then a coral disease came, and. So there was lots of resilience, not only needed for the corals and for the company, but for me as a founder, as a person, but really saw through things like Hurricane Dorian how ecosystems such as mangrove forests and coral reefs, they act like natural seawalls. A healthy reef reduces wave energy by 97%, mangrove forest by 66%, and people's lives were actually saved during that storm. So we know just how important this work is. We rely as humanity on nature so much more than nature relies on us. So persisted through all those setbacks, signed contracts, got hired to help design what will become the biggest coral farm in the world with Saudi Arabia's leading university, and now are on a contract with them to grow corals at their facility, opening up a pilot farm in Dubai, looking to scale to the United States, Barbados, Mexico, all around the world, while then also having amazing success, again, working with these local communities. Most of our staff in the Bahamas is Bahamian, having this emphasis on tourism, workforce development, education, as we also run a business and do good science to figure out better ways to innovate for growing corals faster, making them more resilient, using AI technology and machine learning to better analyze the corals so we have better outcomes on the reefs. Winning Prince William's Revive Our Oceans Earthshot Prize, really going in spite of all the bumps from strength to strength, and now gearing up to raise a Series A. We're negotiating terms, offer from a lead investor. It's the first time ever, I believe, for a coral restoration company to be raising a Series A investment round. So seeing a lot of great success, as we also know how difficult this challenge is, and advocating for our leaders to still step up and stop killing reefs to begin with by solving for climate change, pollution, overfishing, as we also scale restoration solutions. Coral Vita's ultimate goal is to be put out of business. Hopefully there's a world where there's no more reefs that need restoration, but we're not heading in that direction right now. We hope to catalyze a restoration economy where we have actually demonstrated ecosystem scale impact through a market-based approach, where people are investing in ecosystems and nature as well as frontline communities. And there's a global network of large-scale land-based coral farms in every nation with reefs around the world. And if we're really nailing it, hopefully we can go into seagrass restoration and mangrove restoration, coastal Vita, and really have a service platform to preserve the ecosystems that sustain all of us for future generations, and exploring opportunities in genetics and resilience work. There's now coral restoration insurance policies. So tapping into these innovative conservation financing mechanisms, getting hotels, governments, developers to pay to restore these ecosystems, and showcasing, again, you can do for profit, for nature, for good. That hopefully not only will benefit coral reefs, Coral Vita as a company, but can extend outwards and help galvanize an entire industry that deploys capital and solutions to so many people and organizations all around the world. Humanity relies on nature so much more than nature relies on us. And whether you love coral reefs, whether you live on coral reefs, whether you've never seen one in your life and you're thousands of miles away, ultimately, we depend on them and so many other ecosystems like forests, mangroves, seagrass meadows. If you like a seafood dinner on your plate, if you like toes in a sandy beach, if you're concerned about refugees, if you've got property on the coast, all of those things are threatened when we lose nature, when we lose biodiversity. Coral reefs as a single ecosystem take up less than 1% of the seafloor. They sustain the livelihoods of 1 billion people in over 100 nations and a quarter of marine life, and generate $2.7 trillion a year. They power tourism economies, protect coastlines from storms, sustain fisheries. There's even medicines on the market fighting viral infections, cancer, arthritis that have compounds that come from coral reefs. Half of them have died since the 1970s, and over 90% are projected to die by 2050. So within basically a single human lifetime, we can lose one of the most incredible, inspiring, magical, and also essential ecosystems. And we have the opportunity right now to still make a difference, to protect coral reefs and to regenerate them, to solve for the threats that are killing them, like warming temperatures, pollution, overfishing, and to catalyze a restoration economy, to fund nature, to fund frontline communities, to fund solutions that will take care of all of us. So with that, I also invite people to get in the water, to see coral reefs yourself, to go into nature in whatever form, because it's amazing, it's healthy, it's good for you, and then you really can connect with it in such a way that we're all, I think, gonna start fighting for it. What brings me the most joy? I mean, a lot of things bring me joy. I love laughing with friends. I love live music. I love playing music, spending time with my wife, Courtney, and our dog, Panda, scuba diving, playing rugby, getting to work alongside the communities where we're restoring reefs. I could keep going, but I really do believe there's places and ways to find joy in very little things in addition to the big moments and wins. So yeah, try to find joy wherever I can.
Awesome.
And really bad dad jokes. My favorite part of being me is still finding ways to be silly despite finding myself in incredibly serious situations. Whether it's high-level summits or life and death hurricanes, whether it's being with friends or getting into trouble with the ones I love, still always, no matter what, trying to find some way to smile and hopefully bring smiles onto other people's faces. My name is Sam Teicher. I'm the co-founder and Chief Reef Officer of Coral Vita, a mission-driven for-profit that grows resilient corals to restore our world's dying reefs. You can find us at Coral Vita Reefs across social media, and I hope everyone has the opportunity to get in the ocean, to check out coral reefs. You're always welcome to come visit Coral Vita's farms in the Bahamas, Dubai, more and more countries around the world. Hopefully have the chance to plant corals with us, adopt corals, but no matter what, hopefully you'll find ways to connect with nature, and we appreciate your excitement about joining us in this mission to take care of the ecosystems that sustain us all.